Madam President, members on both sides of the aisle agree that any stimulus we pass must be timely, targeted, and temporary. We need to put our economy back on track, and the key to putting the economy back on track is that the spending we do through this stimulus be targeted, temporary, and timely. Each of these principles are important, and they each are loaded with meaning. It needs to be timely because it needs to be directed as soon as possible. As the President, as early as this morning, said, it is essential that we get it out there. It also has to be targeted because it cannot just go to all of the wonderful things upon which the Congress might spend money. It has to be targeted to those very things which the economy needs in order to create jobs at this moment in time. And it must be also temporary because we well know that at some point this economy is going to recover. And as it recovers, it wouldn't be a good idea for government spending to be out of control and be the beast that feeds inflation. We do not want to come out of this economic crisis only to be creating the next one, which would be an inflationary problem for our economy. Americans want and deserve solutions that will create jobs and support the American worker. And I've joined a number of my colleagues in offering an alternative with the right incentives to foster job creation. While creating jobs is essential if we want to achieve economic recovery, it will not fix the problem just with that alone. Our nation is still in the midst of the worst housing slump in decades, and many American families face the frightening reality of foreclosure. To date, Congress and the White House and the private sector have put forth a number of programs to help struggling homeowners, but we've yet to see significant results from any of these various programs that have been out there. This is because at the core of the problem are privately securitized mortgages which are originated without a guarantee from the government-sponsored enterprises. These are the privately securitized mortgages that are not Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, or GSE sponsored. These mortgages account for only 15% of all outstanding mortgages, but they represent more than 1/2 of all of the foreclosures that are taking place today. So if left alone, the crisis will only continue to worsen. According to one expert, we can expect to see 1.7 million more foreclosures in the year of 2009 alone. It's a downward spiral that seems to find no bottom. So today I'm proposing a plan that would provide troubled homeowners with options and incentivize participation from the private sector, from these private securitizers that are out there in the private sector. Included in the plan is a loan modification program which will encourage mortgage servicers to help stem the tide of foreclosures. Currently, there are two primary factors hindering mortgage servicers from modifying loans: a lack of proper compensation, and the second and equally important is the threat of litigation. The plan has a two-pronged approach that aims to address these concerns by properly compensating mortgage servicers and removing the legal restraints that prevent modifications. Under the plan, the federal government would temporarily provide a monthly incentive fee to servicers who modify privately securitized mortgages. It also includes a safe harbor provision that removes the legal constraints currently inhibiting modifications. This plan also recognizes the integrity of contracts. There is always the potential that a relatively small number of junior investors could be harmed by the modifications permitted by this program. With this in mind, the proposed legislation eliminates the need for these junior investors to file suit by creating a small claims fund that the Treasury may use to resolve potential disputes. This will go a long ways in protecting investors, acting in good faith for the greater good, and an incentive that is greatly needed if we want investors to be on board in helping to resolve this current crisis. The plan has been supported by a number of economists, including Columbia Business School Dean Glenn Hubbard and Vice Dean Christopher Mayer. According to a Columbia report, the plan could reduce up to 1 million foreclosures at a cost of about $11 billion, roughly 10% of the $100 million required by other plans. I've been supportive of similar concepts, including the plan put forth by the FDIC Chairman Sheila Bair, which is based on the model used to modify the loans that the FDIC took over from IndyMac. I believe this plan is even more taxpayer-friendly because Future potential losses are shouldered by private investors, not the government. So as we continue talking about the stimulus, I urge my colleagues to consider the need to address the root cause of this crisis, which is the housing market. Americans are struggling, and unless we provide them with realistic alternatives to foreclosure, we will fail to fix the larger problem at hand. A lot of colleagues of mine have expressed support for this plan. I encourage members on both sides of the aisle to please look at this plan carefully, because as a result of what we're doing here on stimulus, we need to also deal with the housing problem. The housing problem is what brought us into this problem. We will not get out of this economic mess until we once again resolve the housing problem. We need to tackle it in two ways, in my view. We need to tackle it in keeping people, families in their homes, avoiding foreclosure where possible. A huge number of today's inventory of unsold homes are homes that are coming out of foreclosure. Those homes, in and of themselves, obviously tend to be sold at much lower prices. So it continues to drive the market down. It depresses values. It depresses the market. Second problem, obviously, is still the old law of economics of supply and demand. We have a huge inventory of unsold homes. This inventory of unsold homes also impacts price. So I really support not only my proposal, but the proposal that my colleague from Georgia, the senator from Georgia, Johnny Isakson, has proposed, which is to incentivize the purchase of homes by providing a $15,000 tax credit over a year or 2 years to anyone in America who purchases a home. The bottom line is, if we can get the market back again and people buying homes again, we draw down that inventory of unsold homes. If we slow down or can bring foreclosures to a halt, those two elements working together will be a great way in which we can now begin to see the housing market stabilize on prices, which will also stabilize the foreclosures of the future. You see, families that are in trouble today were not the same families that were in trouble 2 years ago when this crisis began. Families that are in trouble today are people who increasingly find themselves upside down on their mortgage because of the continuing decline of home values. So I hope my colleagues will carefully analyze these proposals, not only mine and Amendment 159, but also Senator Isakson's proposal. I think these two things, hand in hand, will help us to really make a difference in the current housing crisis. There are many other things we can talk about in the stimulus, but fixing housing is at the core of what we must do. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.